All right. First rule of the channel, we not talk about the channel. Second rule of the channel, this is not legal advice. So I was reading a book on economics right now, and my mind kept wandering about the question that I had earlier today about whether or not I valued Puka higher than Jamar Chase. And it's a little bit of a complicated answer. I responded back. It's not about value, it's about like risk versus reward. And again, this channel is primarily a strategy and theory channel about fantasy football. Like I like the abstract of fantasy football to think about other things, but in general, like we're trying to figure out a way to game our opponents. Because even if I knew who the objective most valuable fantasy football guy would be for 2024, it would not be to my advantage to pick him with the 101. It would be to my advantage to take him at the lowest possible pick relative to where everybody else values that player, right? So that's what I'm doing with my rankings. They're not meant to be like a one-to-one overlay for a draft and say, hey, I'm going to take this guy here because he's the third most valuable wide receiver. No, no, no. The idea is how low can I push that guy down the board and still get the guy that I have listed as my like number 3 wide receiver. So in general, one of the things that it looks like is going to go on for my draft strategy this year is like Josh Jacobs and Rashad White are criminally undervalued in most leagues. They're 14 and 15. They're being listed as like running back twos. And over here, they're 13, 14, and they're listed on Fantasy Pros going as 34 and 35, right? So my draft strategy right now, relative to where I have those guys, and I think I have Rashad Wright 4 and Josh Jacobs as 7, right? And then Zamir White would be another guy that he's going as like running back 30. Um, my strategy right now is to have those 3 guys be my starting running backs and my flex in my leagues. So I can devalue the running back position. That means in most of my drafts right now, based off if their value remains the same going into the season, um, I would be looking at taking all these running backs, and I can pull these up so I can look at them like Christian McCaffrey, Brees Hall, Bijan, Kyron Williams, JT, all those guys. They're just not going to be on my board because I'm probably not even going to consider them. And again, in a snake draft format, I would have to have a particular pick to get like Christian McCaffrey. I have to have the 101, maybe the 102 if the guy in my league thinks Brees is better. Maybe at the 103 if he goes if the 2 guys ahead of me go Brees and then like CD Lamb, maybe Christian McCaffrey. Like that's such a narrow way to look at your draft that I tend not to do that. Like I don't go in, hoping and praying that a certain guy falls to me. Like I know the value of my guys. I know where value is to be found in other places in my draft. And I go out and I try and attack that. So like that's what I'm doing with my rankings is how can I take advantage of the flaws in these rankings, these subjective rankings, because these rankings don't matter. They're not real. They're people making stuff up about where guys are going. And I'm trying to explain my rationale about where I think guys should be valued. Again, like Puka's range of outcomes to finish as a wide receiver 1 or the wide receiver 1 overall, I think is higher than Jamar Chase being able to finish as a wide receiver 1 overall. I don't see the road for Jamar Chase to finish as a wide receiver 1 overall, while Puka could do that. That's the difference, like between the 2 players. Like I could also see Puka finishing lower than Jamar Chase in the draft or at the end of the season. Um, but Jamar Chase's ability to finish higher than where he's going to be drafted at. And again, if I pull him up on ESPN, he's wide receiver 3. Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to finish as like around wide receiver 3. I just don't see how he hits that elite uh legendary season. That's kind of the point behind it. Like the 2 guys last year, as I have sleeper pulled up, it was very difficult to predict, if almost impossible to predict, that Justin Jefferson would get hurt and the quarterbacks or Kirk Cousins would get hurt for the Vikings, right? Like that's just not something that anybody was predicting ahead of time. If we would have known that, we would have dropped Justin Jefferson down our boards, right? The other guy, Jamar Chase, if I can find either of these guys and be, somewhat prepared. If with Jamar Chase, if we had known that like he would be a little dinged up, that T Higgins would be dinged up, that Joe Burrow would be knocked out, like we would have knocked him down the board from where he was going. I looked it up beforehand. He was like on ESPN going into my draft weekend. Jamar Chase was the 102, right? And I didn't think that was a bad place for him to be valued. Although, like I in my auction draft, I wouldn't be taking him. And again, this is a strategy video or channel. So when I talk about like strategy, like I wanted Puka Nacua in all my drafts last year. And in my auction draft, I had to have a conversation with my co-manager about like whether or not we would actually draft Puka. Because if he put a $1 bid on Puka, someone could snake him for us for $2, right? So I was like, hey, it may be better off that you just do not put in a bid at all on Puka, and then I will pick him up manually off of free agency when the roster's unlocked. That was the actual strategy behind it. So again, from a value based standpoint, like yeah, I have him as wide receiver like 20 overall going into the season, and it was just like, hey, maybe we should just not pick him up at all, because that's the safest way to make sure he's on our roster is to go to game the system. Don't show our hands. It's poker. Don't show our hands that we want Puka, because if you're in an auction draft and you put a guy up for $1, someone goes, I don't even know who this guy is, but I'll stake him for you for $2 because I don't care. And then in order to get the guy that you actually wanted, you have to put $3 in. So in an auction draft, they actually go, hey, if you really want a guy at the end of the board, put him in for $2 because now someone has to stake him for you for $3. And I told my league managers, just don't even bring him up. Like don't bring him up. Let someone else like put him up for auction and then snake him from that guy. That's the strategy behind it. So right. So in my other league, my high school league, I talked to my co-manager ahead of time, and there was no rules about having a valid lineup going out of the draft. So we didn't draft a kicker or a defense coming out of the draft. We drafted like 15 guys, and then we tried to do a trade beforehand, and then that draft with Puka. Again, I knew Puka was going to go undrafted in that league, so we didn't even pick him up. We didn't draft him. We tried to make a deal, and we were trying to ship like Nico Collins for like God, I don't even remember like it some like 11th round guy. Like I was trying to clear guys off my board so I could pick up a kicker and a defense and then still have room to put Puka on our roster. Like those are the things that we're doing from a strategy standpoint to win our league. So like, and I talked about this last year. There's a question about this from a dynasty perspective. My number one last year going into the NFL draft for rookies was Dalton Kincaid. And the reason behind that was like, you have to be able to predict the future far enough in advance that like that Stephon Diggs right here, he was going to go over the age apex after last season into this season. So now you have theoretically the next Travis Kelce being in a draft, right? And you already know that the number one option in that offense attached to a good quarterback and Josh Allen is going to end up being this tight end. The unicorn that we all look for is the next Travis Kelce. So you got to look more than 2 steps ahead. So when everybody else is saying, oh, the number one guy in Dynasty is Bijan, it's like he's going to this horrible situation with Arthur Smith in Atlanta. What would make you think that this, you can't predict that Arthur Smith is going to get fired. So it's like, what would make you think that Bijan, talent or not, is going to be that guy when you can predict ahead of time that Stephon Diggs is going to hit the age apex next year? So those are the things that I'm looking at. So again, like from a strategy perspective, when I talk about, if I pull up my wide receiver rankings, I'm trying to look at guys going like, how high can they finish the season at? If you came to me and said, hey, 2-to-1 odds, who do you think the wide receiver 2 is going to be next year? I go Garrett Wilson. Like 2-to-1 odds, like who do you think the wide receiver 1 next year is going to be overall? CeeDee Lamb, right? Who do you think the wide receiver 3 is going to be? Puka Nacua. That's where I would put them. Like the Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams have to be downgraded from a statistical standpoint, or actually from a ranking standpoint, because of the age apex. It's just how it goes, right? And again, like I when I look at Tyreek Hill being wide receiver 2 overall, the 103, I go like, he's over the age apex. Like you have to factor that in. I talked about that with Travis Kelce last year. He's already in this old man range of tight ends. like at a certain point, you have to go like, hey, maybe he shouldn't go in the first round of my draft, chasing his 2022 outcome into 2023. Like that's just the thought process behind it. Like you do you draft who you want to draft, but trying to find the guys that have more value based off of where they're subjectively being ranked, and then going out there and having the strategy to appropriately go out there and attack them to be on my roster. Like having your Rachaad Whites early, going out and getting him before he ends up finishing the season as this high value running back one. Like those are the thoughts that are going on in my head. So going into a draft, like I'm not valuing Ja'Marr Chase or not to throw the comment. I thought it was a really good comment. I should point this out. I'm not valuing one guy over another guy. I'm going like, how can I walk out of my draft with more in my pockets than the other guys in my draft? Like what is my strategy going to be to get more of those guys in my pocket? So even like last year in one of my drafts, like my snake draft, I picked up Drake London in the 5th. Obviously he's a bust, but the thought process behind like, hey, this guy's got so much upside if they actually could use them correctly. So the thought process about the talent is correct. The other thought process of hey, we're going to expect the offense to function differently than we had evidence of in the past. Like that's where the thought process would be broken. So like trying to rectify some of those thoughts and come through with a cohesive draft strategy based off of rankings. That's kind of what I'm trying to do overall. Like if I get to a pick in a draft, and I should bring this up again, and from a snake draft perspective, if I go into a draft and I'm at the 107 and I'm staring at Ja'Marr Chase, am I trying to tell you that I would be like, oh, I'm not going to take Ja'Marr Chase there? That's not what I'm saying. Like I would be sitting there just like everybody else, sweat coming down my forehead, going like, I'm going to pull the trigger on Ja'Marr Chase because I know what Ja'Marr Chase is. I know that he may not have the upside as other guys in the draft, but again, the same process that'll win me a league will lose me a league. If I go overvaluing players because I think that they have a better chance to win me a league, like, yeah, I might be right. I might win my league. On the other hand, I might be really wrong and be drafting, Drake London in the first round of my draft because of talent when, he's going to barely be a wide receiver 3 for most of the season. Like that's fantasy football. Like, and I want to be able to appropriately be able to put the guy into the round where I feel comfortable taking him when everybody else is going to undervalue a guy. So again, like at Zamir White, and this is one of the guys that, like, as of right now, going into the rookie draft for the NFL, Zamir White, I think he was like running back 31 on Fantasy Pros. If I'm not mistaken, got to be somewhere around here. There's Tajay Spears. Maybe he's lower. Zamir White, running back 29, going 79 overall. Like if things stayed the same going into the season, I think there might be a little bit of potential for him to win a league at that price. That's all I'm saying. So if I want Zamir White, I can wait till 79 overall, and then it becomes a coin flip if I can get Zamir White at 79 overall. In a Fantasy Pros league. So in order to make sure I get him, I'm probably going to have to go up a round earlier to get him. And that's if I'm not in a snob league where he's going to get pushed up further and further as the hype train goes on. So then at a certain point, like where I would actually rank Zamir White, as I think I have him as my running back 8, I think is where I have him. Running back 9 is where I have Zamir White. Like now I have to really think about taking Zamir White as the 21st overall pick in the draft. Then there's very little return on investment for Zamir White at that point for me. Like that's just how I would look at it. So like now I'm going like, oh man, if I take Zamir White at pick 21 and it becomes that coin flip, he's either going to burn me or he's going to win me a league at I don't like those odds. Those odds are just not good at that point. So even then, like I have to decide, like, okay, is maybe a round earlier. If I take Zamir White in the 4th, is that still a little rich for me? Well, now I'm going to be looking at, well, if Rachaad White's there at pick 35, that coin flip is really nice between Rachaad White and Zamir White. And hey, if Rachaad White goes off the board, but I'm probably going to overvalue Rachaad White to the 3rd. So that means that I can still take Zamir White there. But, I also like Josh Jacobs. So now I'm pushing both these guys up. And in a snake draft, this is why I hate snake drafts. I have to have the right pick to be able to get these two guys in the right range where I'm taking advantage of everybody else's ignorance on the value of the players, right? In an auction draft, going back to the Puka Nakua and Jamar Chase question, I can get both Puka Nakua and Jamar Chase provided they don't go beyond the value that I've already assigned to them. So I could theoretically get both of those under the value, the auction value that I've assigned to both those guys. So I can get them both. In some other leagues where you see like I think ESPN is probably better. So Jamar Chase at 3 and Puka Nakua at 7, you're going to have a hard time getting both these guys, and you're going to be in a hard place to end up having to worry, or you're going to be a very narrow range of possibilities where you have to even worry about having to pick one or the other over each other in a lot of these situations. So, and again, like I said, there's a lot of guys that when we start getting closer and closer to draft time in August and September, there are a lot of guys that I'll just flat out take off my board in the snake draft. And in the auction draft, hey, it's all about like how much value I can get out of a guy. So like last year, and if CD Lamb was going for like $38, like that's a smash deal. Like I don't even have to think about that. Because he should have been valued at like $50 in an auction draft. So I don't even have to think about that. So it doesn't matter who or what reason, like Tyreek Hill being over the age apex. If I can get Tyreek Hill for $35, it's Tyreek Hill for $35, which is going to function a little bit different from that snake draft, where now it's like, okay, where do I want to take him at what pick? Do I want to take Tyreek Hill? And again, just based off my rankings, like Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams are going to be over the age apex. And I'm only downgrading them by like a couple of spots. Like, or actually, I think I'm upgrading Devontae Smith because of lack of competition for targets. And then I'm slightly downgrading Tyreek Hill by like a couple of slots because of the age. Like I ain't going out on a limb on a lot of these guys. So again, I'm trying to build a ranking for me so I can take advantage of other people to know who I'm going to go into a draft to get my league winners. Because a lot of these guys end up being white noise. That's what I was talking about the other day is when we look at the draft overall from last year, like half the draft picks in the first 5 picks like bust. Like there's just, you can't predict some of these injuries. You can't predict some of the like Kyren Williams. Maybe if you were in the weeds, there were some people that saw the tea leaves and they were able to pick a Kyren Williams up. But for the most part, most of us were wrong on him. And trying to guess and be right on some of these guys, like there's the luck component of fantasy football where it doesn't matter. You can flip a coin and all the analytics and all the variables and all the research that you did just doesn't matter because you're not you're not Arthur Smith and you don't get to ruin like 3 high value players because you suck at life. Like that's just how fantasy goes. So like that's when I talk about these guys. Like Puka is probably undervalued slightly, and Jamar Chase is probably slightly overvalued because again the competition of targets. Like the story that I can tell makes a little bit more sense to me. And if you disagree with that, like that's fine. Like that's what we want. That's how you win your league your way, and I win my league my way. And that's like why my co-managers I have to have co-managers because it's more important that I roll out a rookie Stephon Diggs and have everybody look at me and go like, who is this guy? And then have him like put up like 3 points on the week because like I know who Stephon Diggs is, than actually winning the week sometimes. Like, and my co-manager are like, shut up. Like, but the same process that'll win me that league, and this happened this year, is one league we benched the Raiders defense against the Chargers, and another league we rolled them, and that one of my co-managers is like, oh, I get it now. So like that's kind of what's going on with fantasy football and how the rankings are and the strategy behind all of this. So anyway, a little longer rambly strategy video. I'm not expecting too good of engagement on it, but I wanted to get it out because it's kind of distracting me from actually reading.